Our very first speaker is going to be Kristy Titus, a board of director for the Sportsmen of Trump, and we're very, very honored to have her here today. So if everybody would welcome Kristy.
Hello, everyone. Thank you all to everyone who came out here today to be here with all of us. I want to talk to you today about why Donald Trump deserves your vote, and more importantly, 4 more years serving the American people as president. When we vote, we all should take the time to ask ourselves some very important questions, because how we answer them will literally decide the fate and the future of our country. Do you believe in the Constitution and upholding the words that are written within that document? Do you want to have a president that puts the American people first? A president that supports working families? Do you want a president that supports our law enforcement and believes in law and order? Do you want affordable health care that is transparent in pricing and competitive in quality? If you answered yes to any of these questions, then President Donald Trump deserves your vote and 4 more years serving this country as president. The things that President Trump has been able to accomplish for this generation will have the lasting impact on the next generation as well. But as we all know, his work is not done. President Trump is fighting for you, and the best is yet to come, despite 2020 being unlike any other year that we have ever experienced, nor we could ever imagine possible. This year's been monumental. First of all, we go into the first of the year. President Trump is in a bogus impeachment fight. He's literally trying to overturn a duly elected president. Then directly we go into a global pandemic from China's COVID-19 virus, which has cost the lives of Americans. It's shut down our country. It's put millions of people out of work. It's forced hundreds of thousands of small business owners to close their doors. We've closed our schools. And now we have BLM and Antifa destroying our cities. Americans are now called systematically racist. And we're in a fight for our Supreme Court, and the year's not over. With all this going on, I don't want any of you to lose hope or lose faith, because our great American comeback is underway, and President Donald Trump is the man to lead it. Under President Trump's leadership, we've achieved record economic success and prosperity for all Americans. And we'll do it again. President Trump is highly scrutinized over his coronavirus response, but it was swift. And as early as January 31st of this year, the president declared the coronavirus a public health emergency, and he shut down the borders of entry from China to the United States of America. And in doing so, he protected the lives of the American people. But while doing so, we have the Democrat Party and the media, Nancy Pelosi, Joe Biden, they were all scrutinizing and attacking President Trump. They took the side of China, they called him a xenophobe, and they called him a racist. But our president is strong, and he's smart, and he has broad shoulders. He took the blows from the media and the left in order to protect the American people, and by doing so, he saved countless lives. On March 13th, President Trump declared a national emergency, which granted $42 billion to fight the coronavirus. Our president even donated his own salary, which he's never actually taken, but he donated his salary for this. President Trump led the largest mobilization since World War II, delivering personal protection equipment and supplies to America's hospitals. And this is the same point in time where here in Oregon, we experienced firsthand what a lockdown meant. Overnight, our governor, Kay Brown, stripped us of our liberty, and we the people literally had no say in it. Businesses were shut down, schools were shut down, and we told every young person and adult that they were no longer able to go to work unless Kate Brown deemed your job or your business essential. Now keep this in mind, in Oregon, liquor stores were deemed essential, marijuana dispensaries were deemed essential, and drive-up strip clubs were deemed essential. People were banned from socializing and quarantined to their homes. And we were all told that if we went to school or we went to work, that we could die or we could inadvertently kill our family members. And Americans, we are afraid. But according to Kate Brown's lockdowns, the coronavirus must be really smart, because miraculously this virus didn't spread at these liquor stores that she deemed essential, pot dispensaries, or the long lines at big box stores. Meanwhile, mom and pop stores, small businesses, and restaurants were closed because they were somehow more dangerous. We gave up our liberty and we gave up our freedom, and we shouldn't have. And I'm not saying that this virus is not deadly, but it can be. But there's also another way, a way that allows citizens to enjoy what liberty means and freedom of choice. I've witnessed what true liberty looks like in the face of the coronavirus firsthand, because my fiance is a Swedish citizen, and during the height of the pandemic, I spent over a month in Sweden, in the populated city of Stockholm, which has nearly 1 million people living in it. But life in Sweden, even in the most populated areas, is very different than here in Oregon. There's no mandatory masks, there's no school closures, and no lockdowns, and yet the virus is one of the lowest occurrences in the world. When I came back to Oregon, masks are mandated, and even in these later phases of Kate Brown's quote-unquote reopening, restaurants are at a fraction of normal capacity, most schools aren't open, and our liberty remains stripped from us. We saw South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem take the side of liberty. No mandatory masks and no shutdowns. If you had health risks or family members that you were concerned about, you had the liberty to make the decision to self-quarantine. And she didn't decide for the people which businesses would be deemed essential. That is what liberty means. If it means that you have a choice and not a government mandate. But here in Oregon and in many other states, we are told that they are the experts. And we, the people, rolled over. We gave away our liberty, and we gave away our prosperity, and we gave away our opportunity for a virus that we now know has a 99.97% survival rate of those infected and that get tested, and that the survival rate is actually even higher than that because many people that get the virus don't actually get tested. And what has happened during all of this? We've had suicide rates increase, small businesses collapse, we see drug and alcohol addiction and substance abuse increase, domestic and child abuse increase, and people are alone. 52% of young adults are now living at home with their parents because life is expensive and it's tough to find a job, because they literally shut down the country. And think about this, it's so bad that 1 in 4 young people have seriously contemplated suicide in the last 90 days. Many of the young adults in this country feel alone and they feel helpless in the face of this pandemic. And where has this left all of us? Less trustful of the system and more in debt. And we gotta ask ourselves, who really benefits from all of this? The sad answer is that the billionaire class is benefiting from these lockdowns. Amazon's Jeff Bezos is getting richer, Google is getting more powerful, while small businesses are being crushed by corporations because of forced closures, and the monopolies are gaining strength. Let's ask ourselves, who who do these monopolies back? Who do they support? Is it the American people? In politics, who do they support? And who's the one who's actually trying to reopen our country? President Trump. He wants our country to prosper. He has literally now survived the coronavirus, and he has personally been administered the therapeutic drugs that he wants to provide the American people for free. And thanks to the Operation Warp Speed, President Trump is now hoping to deliver a vaccine by the end of this year. But the president's experience should give us all hope. Hope that there is indeed life beyond the shadow of the coronavirus, and that we don't have to be afraid. And he's genuinely working hard every single day to protect the lives of the American people. President Trump knows how hard students have been hit by the coronavirus, so he took immediate action. March 20th of this year, he saw what was coming, and he looked to students and he said, look, I'm going to suspend your student loan payments. I'm going to set your interest rates at 0%. This did a couple things for kids. Number one, deferred their payments without consequence. And number two, the kids or young adults that could afford to make payments on their student loans could use this opportunity to buy down their student loan debt. Donald Trump absolutely must win 4 more years. In addition to our country being shut down, the voice of the conservative is being shut down. Young adults that are reliant on social media and have established careers building a base and a following is directly under the fist of these big tech left companies. And we live in fear that when we express our political views, when we express our religious opinions, when we support the Second Amendment, or anything that does not align with our ideology, that they're going to shut us down. And they're silencing us, and they're doing it every single day. You guys saw it in the media all week this week. Conservative voices are being silenced by the mainstream media, and for some of us, even by our employers. We're silenced by our friends, and we're silenced by our family members at times. But this goes beyond that. This even applies to students that are writing papers that their liberal college professors don't agree with. They're penalizing kids in college for conservative views and values, or silencing them altogether. Because of all of this, conservatives are now self-censoring. And many of you know what I'm talking about. You've removed your political platform from your social media. You've stopped talking about how you feel. You're afraid to wear your MAGA hat in front of your friends. And it seems anymore that the only people that have the right to free speech are those of the woke crowd, BLM, or leftist groups. But I want you guys to know that President Trump is protecting our voice, especially on college campuses, because he signed an executive order protecting the freedom of speech on college campuses all across the country. And this is the first time in the history of our country that a president has had to take such extreme measures to ensure that the voice of the conservative gets heard. President Trump also wants our schools to open. He's advocating for the safe reopening of schools because he understands the importance of education. And President Trump wants you to have freedom as it relates to your education. Because let's face it, there are kids that are being left behind in public schools. There are values being taught in public schools that we don't agree with. And there are many public schools that are simply failing to educate kids. And not every child learns in the same manner, which is why having charter schools and homeschools as an option equates to more liberty for America's kids and more success to the individual and ultimately our nation. Let parents be the deciding factor of what environment their child is going to excel. President Trump is pressing for federal and state lawmakers to expand school choice. Additionally, the administration has proposed a $5 billion annual tax credit to promote school choice. This move is supported by 2/3 of Black Americans, which are hard hit by poorly performing schools that are failing kids in cities like Baltimore. And while President Trump is committed to having our children receive the best in education, he is also committed to protecting our children and the American people. He wants to make our schools safer and has encouraged the passage of the Stop School Violence Act, which provides funding and grants to schools to improve their security measures. And right here in Oregon, we understand the need for security. The civil unrest and destruction that has been allowed by our governor, Kate Brown, is inexcusable. Our streets are in complete and total crisis. Antifa is acting as a terrorist movement, and BLM and Antifa, they're based in what's called critical race theory. They want to categorize people by the color of their skin. They want to defund the police. They want to abolish prison. They want to legalize sex work. And they want to dismantle the values of the American family. It says so right on their website. President Trump has swiftly responded to violent outbursts in Seattle, in Kenosha, and even in Portland. But as the civil unrest continues unchecked by our failing leadership of Kate Brown, he is now standing by with the National Guard. President Trump is ready for the governor to call in support to restore the peace in the streets of Portland. Conversely, we have Kamala Harris. She's on the side of the rioters. She promoted a link during the Minneapolis race riots, bailing out rioters through a program called the Minnesota Freedom Fund. This led to the release of violent criminals through not only her donations, but she was joined in the bailout alongside of 13 of Joe Biden's staffers. These are the criminals and the thugs that we have seen burn down businesses in our state. And Kamala Harris and Joe Biden's staff ushered them back into the streets of Minnesota. But let's face it, we believe, everyone believes, that all lives truly matter. And President Trump has been a true leader for all Americans. Under President Trump's leadership, Black Americans, Hispanic Americans, Asian Americans, all Americans have experienced record low unemployment, and Black poverty rates are at their lowest in history. But when President Trump is called a racist, I don't know about you guys, but I take it personally. He's my president. I believe in him. He's not a racist. The United States is a melting pot of individualism. It doesn't matter where you're from or what background you have. And it's completely untrue. Let's talk about what racism does sound like, though. And I hate to even say these words, but how about when Joe Biden said the quote, "You got the first mainstream African American who is articulate and bright and clean cut and a nice looking guy," when talking about Barack Obama. Or when he said, "Poor kids are just as bright and talented as white kids." Or when he said, "If you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, then you ain't black." Or how about when Joe Biden gave a eulogy at the KKK recruiter Robert Byrd's funeral? The media is radio silent, and Trump is attacked. And the mainstream media continues to propagate President Trump as a racist. He publicly has denounced the KKK for years. He has denounced Antifa. But what else can he really do? Let me tell you, President Trump has done a lot. President Trump did something that the Obama-Biden administration failed to do. He signed the historic First Step Act into law, which has been widely hailed as the most meaningful criminal justice reform in the history of, in a generation. And after 8 years in office, why didn't the Obama-Biden administration reform the criminal justice system? Why didn't the Obama-Biden administration allow the shortening of mandatory sentencing for nonviolent drug convictions? You would think, especially with Hunter Biden's extensive drug history, that Joe Biden would be empathetic to the opioid crisis that our country is facing. But he didn't. It was President Trump. Under President Trump's leadership, the Hispanic American community has thrived under record low unemployment. They have an increase in the median income, and that occurred in only his first year of presidency, not counting at the peak of 2019. And they hit a high in home ownership. President Trump stood up to socialism and communism in Venezuela, Cuba, and Nicaragua, and he has made it very clear that American interests do not align with failed socialist policies. President Trump has pledged to protect the LGBTQ citizens and their rights in the workplace. He led a global campaign to decriminalize homosexuality, which was an effort led by Richard Grenell, the acting director of National Intelligence and the first openly gay cabinet secretary. President Trump is standing up for life. He's working to further prevent funding of programs where abortion is used as family planning. President Trump's policies are supporting our brave law enforcement officers, ultimately making our streets a safer place. And he has pledged to not defund the police. And while he understands that majority of police are incredible people, they're incredible people, the system needed some reforms. So he signed the Safe Policing for Safe Communities executive order that encourages and incentivizes local police reforms while maintaining a commitment to law and order. And then, to combat violent crime, his administration reinstated the federal death penalty. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris' ticket have vowed to disarm America. Kamala Harris is literally a California gun-grabbing senator that while in the primary, she stated that she would take away our AR-15s. She would support a mandatory buyback. But let me ask you this. How can Kamala Harris buy back something that she never owned? Let's call this what it is. It's a gun seizure. And as a woman, you would think that she would be concerned with a woman's right to defend herself, for the human right to defend yourself. A recent college poll came out stating that 1/5 of liberal college students now agree that it is okay to use violence against those that they disagree with. And going to college here in Oregon, being a young conservative in Oregon, is something that can physically cause fear. We saw this firsthand when a Trump supporter was murdered for his support of our president. America needs to be able to own a firearm and protect ourselves while we're on college campuses, while we walk to our car in the dark, while we're in our homes, or when we're walking the streets of Portland that are in complete chaos without fear of gun grabbers like Joe Biden and Kamala Harris taking away our firearms. When it comes to your own personal protection, the president will uphold the Second Amendment. He supports our right to choose to be our own first responder wherever we stand. The president wants a secure nation, and secure borders. And he is fulfilling his promises to the American people to build a border wall. Part of our national security has focused the U.S. Border Patrol on arresting hundreds of members of gangs. He's cracking down on illegal immigration and has called on Congress to close loopholes like the catch and release, to put an end to chain migration, to end the visa lottery program, to close asylum loopholes, and help to put a stop to human trafficking. And people may think or say that Donald Trump must hate immigrants because he's doing this. But the truth is that he loves the American people. And he literally married an immigrant. The USA grants 1.2 million green cards each year. President Trump wants to protect the people that are legally waiting in line to lawfully enter this country. And let me tell you, I know firsthand what this is like, as my own fiance is living overseas, waiting in line for legal immigration to our country. The president knows that keeping borders open endlessly drives down our wages, drives down the availability of jobs, and threatens the very sovereignty of our nation. But what we all really want is peace. Peace in our communities, peace in our country, and peace around the world. When President Trump was running for election, the media painted him in this bright picture that he would enter his presidency continuing this never-ending cycle of wars. They said that he would make our world less safe and that he would cost us the lives of our servicemen and women. But President Trump did the exact opposite of what the media would have led you to believe. President Trump is the president of peace. Unlike Barack Obama and Joe Biden, he didn't start a war. Instead, he was able to usher peace into the Middle East. He established Jerusalem, the capital of Israel, and he moved the U.S. Embassy. He secured a historic peace deal, the Abraham Accord, between Israel and the United Arab Emirates. And for the first time in 25 years, President Trump secured a second historic deal between Israel and Bahrain. He oversaw an agreement between Serbia and Kosovo that normalized relationships between the two nations, and he's ending the endless wars in Afghanistan. He's ending the perpetual occupations overseas. President Trump has rebuilt our military and restored the American military strength. And President Trump does use force when it's necessary. We have decimated ISIS. We killed the #1 terrorist leader, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. President Trump ordered the killing of the head of Iran's deadly terrorist organization, Qasem Soleimani. But his focus is not in war. His focus is in making America great. President Trump has become the anti-war party. President Trump is the only president in recent history not to send our young adults overseas to fight in an endless war. War affects young adults directly as they are the freedom fighters. Those young adults that have fought a war on behalf of the American people and left the war with permanent disabilities, President Trump has made a promise to those heroes to give them 100% student loan forgiveness. And for all of our veterans, President Trump's administration has increased funding to a record $8.6 billion for mental health services because he wants to fight the tragedy of veteran suicide. And President Trump has secured over $73 billion for the Department of Veteran Affairs, which is the highest funding in VA history that has allowed the revolutionary signing of the VA Mission Act. And this increases choice and it provides quality care for our nation's heroes. But President Trump is fighting for the health care of all of Americans. I don't know how many of you guys listened to the debate and watched Kamala Harris in her mocking tone tell the American people that if you have a pre-existing condition, President Trump is coming for you. She lied. She wants you to believe that if you have a pre-existing condition, President Trump will leave you uninsured. But the fact of the matter is that President Trump has issued the first executive order in American history to declare it the policy of the federal government to protect individuals with pre-existing conditions. President Trump has prioritized fixing the broken Obamacare system. He has eliminated the individual government mandate penalty. He has repealed the expensive Obamacare taxes. He signed an executive order to improve senior health care, and most importantly, to improve the fiscal sustainability of Medicare. And with an increase in substance abuse because of COVID lockdowns, the president is addressing addiction and opioid abuse by declaring a national public health emergency, and he's actively working to fight the opioid epidemic. Right now, he's fighting for price transparency at hospitals and is challenging drug companies with a favored nation clause to keep prices of the most expensive Medicare drugs to the lowest competitive price possible. And he is in support of the Right to Try Act, which allows terminally ill patients to try new drugs for possible life-saving measures. When it comes to the economy, we all heard then President Barack Obama mock Trump. What are you going to do? Wave your magic wand and bring America back to prosperity, fix the economy? Well, guess what? Trump has a magic wand, and he's lowering costs for all Americans. Since President Trump took office, 2.4 million Americans have been lifted out of poverty, and 5.6 million Americans are now off food stamps. So let me ask you how he did it. He did it under his leadership by having Congress pass historic tax cuts and relief for hardworking American families. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act is the first major tax reform signed in 30 years and the largest tax reform package in history. And I want to remind you all that during the debate, Joe Biden looked at the television screen at the American people and promised that if elected president, he would immediately repeal these tax cuts when he's elected. President Trump rolled back unnecessary job-killing regulations at a historic pace. Regulatory costs have been slashed by $50 billion, saving an American household an estimated $3,100 a year. And as a woman, I love that our president is looking out for women. In 2019, 1.5 million jobs were added for women, which accounts for more than 50% of the total job growth for the first time ever. Women have equal opportunity under President Trump's leadership. He also doubled the child tax credit with an average benefit of $2,200, which went directly into the homes of nearly 40 million Americans. And he approved the largest parental leave program, guaranteeing 12 weeks of paid leave for federal workers. In all of our economic success, the left wants to paint it in a picture that we are in the process destroying the environment, when the truth is that all of our economic success is on the heels of a healthy and clean environment. Our nation's environmental record rates us the strongest in the world for having the cleanest air on record, and we remain the global leader for having access to the cleanest water. A Biden-Harris ticket all but guarantees a $100 trillion environmental Green New Deal that Harris co-sponsored and introduced into legislation. The Green New Deal would expand government control and regulation while abolishing fossil fuels in our country, oil, natural gas, while criminalizing coal and stifling our economy. The president actively pursues policies that encourage environmental protection while promoting economic growth, and has led our nation to energy independence, all without the expansion of government. And President Trump supports the Second Amendment. And a reality that has been long ignored in the environmental and the gun debate is the fact that gun owners have pioneered the environmental movement all across America for nearly a century, with free will of the people and not big government programs. The truth is that the legal purchase and use of guns has been the largest contributor to the environmental conservation effort, paying for programs that benefit America's wildlife, wild places, and the very people that venture into the outdoors. You're not going to hear this on the nightly news or any debate over gun ownership, but wildlife and wild places, the care and concern of our environment, has been sustained by the 100 million firearms owners through the Pittman-Roberts funds, and they have been for nearly a century. Through this taxation, firearms are funding the environmental movement to the sum of $11 billion in Pittman funds to date. And that's not all. Gun owners and hunters double down. When they buy a hunting license or a tag, that fee attributes to 75% of statewide conservation budgets. With the COVID pandemic, families having access to open spaces and wild places is more important now than ever. And just this year alone, President Trump designated 1.3 million acres of new wilderness and opened nearly 4 million acres of land to expand hunting and fishing opportunities for the American people. In Oregon, as I drove over here, I drove by Detroit Lake, and I saw some of the catastrophic destruction of our wildfires here in Oregon. We've been hard hit by the lack of active forest management. And I know I come from a family. My father was a millwright in a sawmill. My uncles were timber fallers. And I understand personally how underutilized our sustainable resources are being managed by our current elected government, Kate Brown. But President Trump is working to protect our nation's forests and has encouraged state and local governments to adopt best practices and active forest management plans. And in August, President Trump, he signed the Great American Outdoors Act into law. This is the single largest investment in our national parks and public lands in our country's history. It provided $900 million a year to permanent funding for the Land and Water Conservation Fund. President Trump is not only the president of economic success, he is a steward to our environment. The success of the Trump economy is undeniable, and coming out of the shadows of the coronavirus, there was no one that is more qualified to lead our country through recovery. In the last 5 months alone, despite the pandemic, despite our closures, despite our shutdowns, President Trump has added 11.4 million jobs back into the economy. And over 52% of the jobs that were lost due to the coronavirus have been recovered. But beyond peace and prosperity, ensuring that the Constitution is upheld is of the utmost importance to this president. President Trump continues to reshape the federal judiciary at a record pace and is following through on his promises to the American people to appoint judges that will uphold the Constitution and the written rule of law. President Trump has nominated, and the Republican-controlled Senate have confirmed, a grand total of 218 judges, 2 Supreme Court justices, Gorsuch and Kavanaugh, and soon, Amy Coney Barrett. And for the first time in nearly 40 years, there is not a single circuit court vacancy that exists anywhere in this nation. President Trump is a president that upholds the Constitution. And this is a very important point, because the Constitution is the greatest political document ever written in the history of our world. The Constitution represents we, the people. It is the first political document of its kind. It does not tell you what you can or should not do, or should do. It starts by giving and saying what the government cannot do. The government cannot deny your right to free speech. The government cannot take your guns away. The government cannot tell you what religion you can practice. The government cannot spy on you. The government cannot accuse you of something without a speedy trial. The government cannot force you to house soldiers in your residence. Everything else is left up for the states and we the people to decide. The Constitution is the first document that gives rules for the government and not for the subjects or the people. The left controls colleges, they control the media, they control social media, they control mega corporations, they control celebrity influencers in Hollywood, they control professional sports, but they cannot control us. This is the exact reason why upholding the Constitution is so critical. It is also why we don't want to give power-hungry people more control over our lives, more control over our choices, and more control over our livelihood. This is why a Biden-Harris presidency is so dangerous. It is becoming more and more apparent that a Biden-Harris ticket would equate to having a moving ball, so to speak, on the number of Supreme Court justices. And Joe Biden has admitted to being open to packing the Supreme Court and changing the number of Supreme Court justices from the current 9, which has been the standard for 150 years, to a number that no one knows, or no one knows their true intention. Because they didn't win the Senate and they didn't win the presidency, they're willing to look at changing the rules to win if they were elected. That surely does not represent we the people. They have released no names of whom they would choose to fill the vacancy should one arise, or they create one. Joe Biden said that the American people don't deserve to know. That is, after all, until the Biden-Harris ticket is elected, and then and only then will they reveal their radical agenda of their administration and their plans. Trump has actually done what he said he's going to do. He represents a party that wants what is best for young people and for working class Americans that are trying to get ahead. Our vote needs to take responsibility for our country, and this generation should have more opportunity and more ability to be prosperous than their parents did. If you aren't successful, then it's on you, nothing else. You have no one to blame. Hopefully, our students are studying something meaningful if they're in college that's going to equate to a better or good paying job, or better yet, avoiding college if it's right for that kid, and instead studying a trade, working with their hands, building a business, working for something that helps people. Is the debt really worth a meaningless piece of paper if at the end of it you can't find a job for what you've studied? Is your education going to help you live out the American dream? And instead of asking our young adults, where are you going to college? Start asking them why they're going to college. If we lose this presidency and we aren't able to open our economy, if we lose the freedom of our speech, if we lose more liberty to make choices for our own health care, then you can look forward. We can all look forward to our country being changed and Kamala Harris stepping into the scene to radicalize and fundamentally transform America. We need a red wave in Oregon. With failed local leadership and endless chaos, we have everything to gain by voting Republican and another 4 more years of Donald J. Trump as president. Together, we will make America great again, again. Thank you. Thank you.